Today, I'm going to tell you a story so quiet it almost whispers, yet powerful enough to change everything. It unfolds in the heart of the Wild West, where dust hangs in the air, rifles rest by the door, and one wrong choice can mean death. This is a land where fate crosses paths with violence, and mercy is often mistaken for weakness. It all began with a single moment. Small, almost forgettable, but strong enough to pull two worlds into inevitable collision. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The stagecoach bucked hard as the horses screamed and reared, terror driving them wild. Mara Elwood gripped the cracked leather bench, her fingers burning inside wool gloves as the cold bit through the cabin. Outside, the northern Arizona mountains vanished behind a screaming wall of snow, the wind slashing sideways and erasing sky, trail, and horizon into a single white abyss. "Hold fast, miss," the driver shouted, his words nearly torn apart by the storm. The coach lurched, tilting at a sickening angle, and Mara caught a brief, horrifying glimpse of open air and the dark plunge beyond the trail's edge. The wheels skidded. The climb toward Flagstaff had been cruel from the start, but when the blizzard struck without warning, danger turned fatal. Across from her, a traveling salesman and an elderly couple stared wide-eyed, fear mirrored on every face. The coach slid sideways, and then came the crack, sharp and final. The axle gave way. Mara's stomach dropped as the coach tipped, rolled, and broke apart. Sound and motion shattered into chaos, splintering wood, panicked cries, the weightless terror of falling. Her head slammed into something solid. Darkness closed in. When she came back to herself, pain throbbed behind her temple and the taste of blood coated her tongue. Mara blinked, dazed. Snow drifted down through a jagged hole where the roof had been, settling on her coat and lashes. She lifted a shaking hand to her forehead and hissed at the wet warmth beneath her fingers. "Hello." Her voice barely rose above the wind's mournful howl. "Is anyone there?" The coach lay on its side, half buried in snow. Nearby, the elderly woman lay unnaturally still. Her husband knelt beside her, shoulders shaking as he whispered to her unmoving form. The salesman was gone. With effort, Mara dragged herself upright, breath tearing from her lungs as pain flared through her ribs. "The driver?" she murmured. "We need to find the driver." She forced herself through a shattered window, and the sight outside stole what little air she had left. The horses were gone, broken loose, vanished into the storm. The driver lay twisted against a boulder, his neck bent at a terrible angle no man could survive. Beyond him stretched nothing but wilderness, pine forests buried in white, steep stone walls rising into the storm-dark sky. They were stranded deep in Apache land. The realization settled cold and heavy in Mara's gut. Fort Whipple, where Vance Calder, her fiancé of 6 months, waited, was at least 2 hard days away. Behind them, the mining town they'd left at dawn was no closer. She had grown up on stories of Apache raids, grim tales of ruthless riders striking from the mountains. Even back east in Boston, the name alone carried fear. Now, at 22, she stood in the heart of their territory as night closed in and the storm raged on. "We need shelter," the old man said, grief breaking his voice. Mara swallowed and steadied herself. Panic had no place here. Her father had never raised her to fold under fear. "We'll take what supplies we can," she said. "There has to be a cave, some kind of rock cover nearby." The wind shifted, parting the snow like a torn curtain. Dark shapes moved between the trees. Mara froze, breath locking in her chest as 7 mounted figures emerged from the storm, faces shadowed beneath fur-lined hoods. The Apache had found them. The riders closed in with quiet precision, circling the wreckage. Their leader dismounted in one smooth motion, tall and commanding even at a distance, his presence cutting through the storm like iron through cloth. Unlike the others, he wore no hood, only a narrow band holding his long black hair away from his face. Snow clung to his shoulders and threaded through his hair, yet he stood as if the cold had no claim on him. Mara Elwood stepped forward on unsteady legs, placing herself between the approaching warrior and the grieving old man. Her pulse thundered in her ears, but she lifted her chin and met the man's dark, unblinking stare. "Please," she said, "we mean no harm. Our coach was destroyed by the storm." The leader studied her with a sharp, measuring focus. His face was all hard lines and quiet power, high cheekbones, a strong jaw, eyes that seemed to cut past her skin and read whatever lay beneath. When he spoke, his English was steady, marked by only the faintest trace of an accent. "You stand on sacred ground." Mara blinked. "You speak English." His jaw tightened. "I speak many tongues." "That changes nothing," he went on. "You are where you do not belong." "We didn't choose this place," Mara replied, surprised by the steel in her own voice. "We were headed for Fort Whipple." At the fort's name, the riders stiffened. Their leader did not, but something darkened behind his eyes. A flash of old rage held tightly in check. He spoke the words as if they burned. "You ride toward the bluecoats who kill our children and steal our earth." Mara swallowed. "My fiancé serves there. Captain Vance Calder. We were to be married." The man stepped closer. Snow spun between them, filling the narrow space that separated 2 worlds. Now she could see the pale scar running from his temple down along his jaw, stark against weathered bronze skin. "What is your name, woman with fire in her hair?" The question caught her off guard. "Mara," she said. "Mara Elwood." He gave a single nod, as though the name confirmed something he already knew. "I am Tarek." The name sounded strange to her ears, but she did not ask. Instead, she gestured towards the shattered coach. "There are injured people here. An old man. The driver is dead. If you could help us reach the fort." "No." The word dropped between them, heavy and absolute. "The passes are sealed by snow," Tarek said. "The valley trail belongs to soldiers who fire on my people without question." His gaze locked onto hers. "You will come with us." It was not an offer. Fear crawled up Mara's spine, but she did not retreat. "And if we refuse?" Tarek's expression remained carved from stone, yet something shifted in his eyes. Respect, perhaps, earned by her refusal to bow. "Then you will die here," he said calmly. "Woman with fire hair. The storm will return, stronger. Even your frontier lancers would tell you that." As if summoned by his words, the wind rose, screaming across the wreckage and hurling ice against Mara's face. She looked back at the old man. He gave a faint nod, acceptance etched deep into his eyes. Mara turned back. "Very well," she said. "We accept your hospitality." For the first time, the edge of Tarek's mouth softened. Not a smile, but something close. "You choose curious words for a captive, Mara Elwood." "I'm not your prisoner," Mara Elwood said evenly. Even as one of the Ash Hollow riders stepped forward with rope, she held her ground. "I'm choosing to live." Tarek watched in silence as her wrists were bound. "Many captives believe they choose," he said at last. He turned away, calling sharp orders in his own tongue. 2 riders lifted the old man, Jonah Kincaid, onto a horse, while another gathered the few supplies that had survived the wreck. When Tarek returned, he carried a heavy, fur-lined cloak. He did not speak as he settled it over Mara's shoulders, his fingers brushing the warm skin at her neck. The touch struck through her fear like a sudden spark, sharp and unsettling. "You ride with me," he said, his voice lower now. "The distance is short, but the cold is unforgiving." Before she could object, he lifted her onto his horse and swung up behind her. His chest pressed against her back as he took the reins, his arms braced around her. Heat poured from him, sinking through her frozen coat and into her bones. "My camp lies beyond the ridge," he said, his breath warm near her ear. "You will remain there until the pass is open." "And then?" Mara asked, acutely aware of how close he was. Tarek did not answer at once. When he finally spoke, his words carried a weight she could not name. "Then we will see which road the Great Spirit sets before you, Mara Elwood." As they rode into the thickening snow, Mara felt the future she had built slipping away with every hoofbeat. Fort Whipple, Vance Calder. The careful life of a soldier's wife faded into the white void behind her. Ahead lay only the unknown, and the steady, undeniable rhythm of Tarek's heart against her back. She could not know then, as the storm erased their tracks, that the road ahead would alter them both forever. The winter camp lay hidden in a narrow valley, shielded from the mountain winds by towering stone walls. As they descended the trail, Mara counted nearly 30 dwellings, low wickiups and sturdier wooden shelters clustered together. Smoke drifted upward from cooking fires, and children paused mid-play, staring openly at the newcomers. Tarek's hold never wavered, his body forming a barrier against the cold. Despite her fear, exhaustion finally overcame her resolve, and she found herself leaning into his warmth. "You're shaking," he noted quietly. "I'm cold," Mara replied, though it was only part of the truth. Fear, shock, and uncertainty tangled inside her, sharp as thorns. At the heart of the camp, Tarek dismounted in one smooth motion, then reached up to lift her down. His hands spanned her waist, holding her suspended for a brief moment. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, an awareness neither was ready to name. He set her on her feet and stepped back. "Esha will see to your injury," he said, motioning to a woman approaching them. "The old man will be taken to the healing lodge." "Thank you," Mara said, touching the dried blood at her temple. "But I'd like to stay near him. He lost his wife today." Tarek studied her for a long moment. "You carry another's grief while your own future hangs in doubt?" "Compassion isn't a luxury," Mara answered. "It's a necessity." A faint trace of a smile crossed his mouth. "Just Tarek," he said, "and you speak like the Iron Cross brothers who raised me." That caught her off guard. "You were raised by missionaries?" His expression closed instantly, like a door slammed shut. "That story is for another time. Go with Esha now. The old man will join you after he's treated." Mara wanted to ask more, but Tarek had already turned away, issuing low commands to his men. Esha, a woman a few years older than Mara, stepped forward with measured calm. Her dark eyes held no warmth or threat, only careful assessment. "Come," she said in lightly accented English. "You are cold, and you are injured." Esha guided Mara to a small, solid cabin at the edge of the camp. Inside, a fire crackled in a stone hearth, filling the single room with heat and the sharp, clean scent of cedar. Furs were spread across the hard-packed floor, and a simple wooden frame with a deerskin mattress stood against one wall. "This was my brother's place," Esha said, motioning for Mara to sit near the fire. "He died last summer. Frontier lancers shot him while he hunted in the valley." The bluntness made Mara flinch. "I'm sorry," Esha dipped a cloth into warm water and began gently cleaning the cut at Mara's temple. "Your sorrow changes nothing," she said evenly, "just as your blue-coat fiancé changes nothing." Mara tensed. "You know about him?" "Tarek told me while you were taken from the horses." Esha's hands remained steady, careful despite her words. "He says you have courage." She paused. "I think you may also have foolishness." Mara stiffened. "Is it foolish to speak honestly?" "It is foolish to stand against Tarek." Esha applied a sharp-smelling salve to the wound. "He is not like other men. Even among us, he walks alone." "Because he was raised by the Iron Cross brothers?" Mara asked. Isha's hands hesitated for the briefest moment. "That is part of it, not all." She bound Mara's head with a clean strip of cloth. "He returned 10 winters ago. He spoke the white man's language, but he carried our people in his heart. That is why he leads," she continued. "He understands both worlds and trusts neither." Mara took this in quietly. The man who had faced her in the snow now seemed far more complex, caught between worlds, much like herself. "Rest," Isha said, rising. "Food will come soon. The storm will keep us here for days." After she left, Mara shed her damp clothes and wrapped herself in thick furs. Exhaustion weighed on her, yet sleep refused to come. Her thoughts drifted to Vance Calder, waiting at Fort Whipple, likely wondering why she had not arrived. Would he send riders? A search party? The idea brought little comfort. In weather like this, no one would willingly ride into Ash Hollow territory. The door opened suddenly, pulling her from her thoughts. Tarek stepped inside, carrying a steaming wooden bowl. He had changed out of his riding gear, now dressed in buckskin leggings and a loose cotton shirt open at the throat. A silver medallion hung from a leather cord against his chest. "You should eat," he said, offering the bowl. "Elk stew. It will warm you." Mara accepted it carefully. "Thank you." Tarek remained standing as she tasted it. The stew was rich, filling, its heat spreading through her chest and limbs. "Your companion will live," he said after a moment. "The old one. His grief is heavy, but his body is stronger than it looks." "His name is Jonah Kincaid," Mara replied. "He was traveling with his wife. They were going to California to join their son." Tarek nodded once, acknowledging the name without comment. "Names matter," Tarek said quietly. "They carry weight." He stepped closer to the fire and fed another log into the flames. Light climbed his features, sharpening the planes of his face while shadows claimed the rest. He turned to her. "Why do you travel to marry a soldier, Mara Elwood?" The question struck harder than she expected. "Vance Calder is a good man," she replied. "We met in Boston last year at my father's shipping office." "That does not answer me." Mara set the bowl aside, her shoulders tightening. "I fail to see how my reasons concern you." "Everything within my land concerns me," Tarek said evenly, though his gaze held an intensity that stole her breath. "Especially a woman who stands before me without fear when most men would shake." "Perhaps I hide it better than most," she said. Something close to a smile touched his mouth. "Perhaps." He studied her for a moment longer. "Your wound, does it trouble you?" "No." "Esha treated it well. She is my cousin." He turned toward the door, then paused. "Tomorrow, if you wish, you may walk through the camp, under watch. I will not keep you penned like an animal." The gesture startled her. "That's generous." His expression dimmed. "When I was 9 winters old, the Iron Cross brothers locked me in a small room for speaking my own tongue. I know what walls do to a person." His hand rested on the doorframe. "We are not the beasts your army claims we are." I never said you were. You did not need to, he said. His eyes held hers. Your gaze spoke for you when we met. It speaks differently now. Before she could answer, he was gone, leaving Mara alone with her unsettled thoughts, and the lingering heat where his attention had rested. The days that followed settled into a cautious rhythm. Each morning, Riva brought Mara fresh clothes, simple dresses cut from soft-tanned deerskin, and carried away the garments she had worn the day before. Jonah Kincaid remained in the healing lodge, his strength returning slowly, grief never far from him. True to Tarek's word, Mara was allowed to move about the camp, always accompanied by Isha or another of the Ash Hollow women. What she saw unsettled everything she thought she knew. Children laughed and chased one another through the snow, joy sounding the same in any language. Women scraped hides, stirred kettles, and stitched beadwork with practiced hands. Men repaired weapons, worked horses, and returned from hunts with quiet efficiency. This was a living community, not the ruthless horde described in newspapers back east. On her fourth day, Mara came upon Tarek outside the council lodge. He stood with several Ash Hollow riders, deep in discussion, but his attention shifted the moment he saw her. He excused himself and approached, his face unreadable. "The limits chafe," he said. "They do not suit you." She shook her head. "I was thinking how wrong I was about your people. You live much like any town I've known." A flicker of satisfaction crossed his features. "Walk with me." He gestured toward a narrow path leading away from the heart of the camp. Esha, who had been at Mara's side, exchanged a brief look with Tarek and quietly stepped back. Mara followed him, aware of the curious eyes tracking them as they left the center of Ash Hollow behind. "Your presence stirs talk," Tarek said as they walked. "I expected it would." Mara glanced at him. "A white woman in your camp isn't exactly ordinary. It is not your skin that troubles them," he replied, a trace of dry humor in his voice. "It is that I, who swore never to bend to the white man's world, choose to spend my time with you." She studied his profile. "Then why do you?" Tarek did not answer at once. They had reached a narrow clearing where a frozen stream cut cleanly through the valley. Pines heavy with snow ringed the space, muffling the world into a deep, reverent silence. "When the Iron Cross brothers took me," he said at last, "they taught me that everything about my people was savage, our words, our beliefs, our ways." His gaze fixed on the distant ridgeline. "For years, I believed them. I spoke their language, read their books, prayed to their God." "What changed?" Mara asked. "I saw a soldier shoot an Apache woman who begged for food." His voice stayed level, but his jaw tightened. "She knelt before him, her child tied to her back." He paused. "He shot her through the heart. Then he wrote that he had killed a hostile." A chill swept through Mara. "That's monstrous." "That," Tarek said quietly, turning to her, "is the world your people showed me." "That soldier doesn't speak for all white men," Mara said. "Not all are like him." "No," Tarek agreed, bending to pick up a smooth stone from the ice. "But enough are." He weighed the stone in his palm. "You asked why I walk with you." He looked at her again. "Because when you look at me, you see a man, not a savage. That is rare." The admission lingered between them, raw and unguarded from a man who seemed carved from iron. Mara felt the urge to reach for him, to cross the distance between their worlds with a single touch. Instead, she folded her arms against the cold. Tarek noticed at once. "You're freezing. We should head back." They had only taken a few steps toward camp when a shout broke the stillness. Riders were approaching at speed, horses blown and steaming in the cold air. At their center, a man sagged forward in the saddle, blood streaking the snow beneath him. Tarek ran. Mara followed. The injured man was dragged down gently, his face twisted in pain. Even beneath dirt and blood, Mara recognized him, the salesman from the stagecoach. Bram Keller. "What happened?" Tarek demanded. "Frontier Lancers," one of the Ash Hollow riders answered in their own tongue. "A patrol from the fort. They shot him, thinking he was one of us. When they realized he was white, they left him to die." Tarek dropped to one knee, inspecting the bullet wound in Bram's shoulder. "Take him to the healing lodge," he ordered. Then he turned to Mara. "Your soldiers are searching. They shot this man, your fellow traveler, because they thought he was Apache." Mara felt the cold sink deeper into her bones. "They wouldn't do that on purpose." "They did." Tarek rose, his voice sharp as broken stone, as they have done many times before. Snow clung to his buckskins as he scanned the mountains. "If they are combing these ranges, they will find us." "Is that so terrible?" Mara asked quietly. "Couldn't there be talk, negotiation?" Tarek's eyes hardened as he looked at her, the weight of old truths settling between them. "There is no bargaining with men who see us as debris to be cleared," Tarek said, his features tightening. "At first light we move the camp. Deeper into the high country, where the frontier lancers won't follow?" Mara's chest tightened. "And what about me? And Jonah Kincaid? And now this man?" For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Tarek's face. "You cannot reach the fort while patrols ride with fingers already on the trigger, and you cannot stay here alone." "So you come with us," he said at last. "Yes." His eyes held hers. "Until I can secure a safe passage for you." That night, as Mara prepared to lie down, a soft knock sounded at the door. She opened it to find Tarek silhouetted against the dark, the cold stars behind him. "The wounded man is asking for you," he said. "He's fevered, but awake." Mara pulled on her borrowed shawl and followed him to the healing lodge. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of crushed herbs and smoke. The salesman lay on a pallet, his skin pale and slick with sweat in the firelight. Jonah sat nearby, his weathered face drawn tight with worry. "Mara," the man whispered when he saw her. "Thank God, you're alive." She knelt beside him. "Save your strength, Bram Keller." He caught her hand with surprising force. "Listen to me. The soldiers, they aren't just searching. They're planning to burn every Apache camp they find. Orders from the new commander at Fort Whipple." Mara felt Tarek stiffen beside her. "New commander?" she asked. "Your fiancé," Bram said, his voice thinning. "Vance Calder was promoted after the old commander fell ill. His first order was to clear the territory of hostiles before spring." The world tilted. James, her James, had ordered what amounted to slaughter. "There has to be a mistake," Mara whispered. "No mistake." Bram's eyes fluttered. "I heard it myself when I reached the fort after the wreck. I tried to come back and warn them. The patrol found me first." Mara turned to Tarek, bracing for fury. Instead, his face held only a grim, exhausted understanding. "Now you see," he said quietly, "why peace cannot exist while your people refuse to see mine as human." As the truth settled, something inside Mara shifted and broke. The certainty she had carried all her life wavered. Vance Calder, the man who had courted her in Boston, written her poems, promised a future of honor, could not be the same man who ordered the destruction of families. Yet Bram's wounded body lay between them. "I didn't know," she whispered, the words thin and inadequate. Tarek's hand rested briefly on her shoulder, a steadying touch that nearly undid her. "Now you do." They left the lodge together as snow began to fall again. Soft this time, as if the storm had finally spent itself. Tarek walked her back to her cabin without speaking. At her door, he paused. "We leave at first light. Take only what you need." Mara nodded, unable to lift her eyes. As he turned away, she found her voice at last. "Tarek." He stopped and looked back over his shoulder, waiting. "Thank you for showing me the truth, even when it cuts," Mara Elwood said. Something in Tarek's face softened, only for a heartbeat, before the mask returned. "Truth is like the mountain," he replied. "It stands whether we choose to see it or not." Long after he had gone, Mara remained by the fire, watching the flames twist and fold in on themselves. She had never felt so unmoored, and yet, for the first time in her life, she sensed she might finally be stepping onto a path that was truly her own. Dawn arrived with the sounds of a camp coming apart. Mara had slept little, caught between mourning the life she once expected and the sharp clarity of what now lay before her. She gathered her few belongings, her repaired traveling clothes, and the small locket holding her parents' likenesses. When she stepped outside, the camp was already in motion. Ash Hollow women loaded travois with supplies, while the men gathered horses. The Ash Hollow young carried what they could, their faces solemn but steady. They had done this before, Mara realized. Fled soldiers, left shelter behind, begun again. Esha approached, leading a dappled mare. "You will ride this one," she said. "Tarek says you sit a horse well." "He noticed?" Mara asked, surprised. A knowing look crossed Aisha's face. "Tarek notices everything about you, Mara Elwood." She secured Mara's bundle to the saddle. "The old man and the wounded one will ride in the medicine wagon. It will be slow, but safer than leaving them." Mara glanced toward the wagon where Jonah Kincaid was helping settle Bram Keller onto a bed of furs. "That's generous, considering they are white." Esha's expression did not change. "We are not what your books claim. Life is sacred, even the lives of those who would take ours." Before Mara could answer, Tarek appeared astride his black stallion. He wore full Apache dress now, beaded buckskins, a blade at his belt, a single eagle feather tied into his long hair. Red and black paint marked his face, sharpening the lines of his cheekbones and jaw. He looked every inch a warrior. Yet when his gaze met Mara's, she saw the same man who had spoken so plainly beside the frozen stream. "We ride northwest," he announced. "The frontier lancers will expect us to go deeper into the mountains. Instead, we take the canyon lands, where horses cannot follow easily." Mara mounted her mare, adjusting the borrowed dress over her knees. "How far?" 3 days, if the weather holds." Tarek's eyes swept the camp with practiced precision. "Stay close to Esha. If there is trouble—" He hesitated. "If there is trouble, you expect me to flee?" Mara said firmly. "I won't abandon these people. Not after what I've learned." Something like respect flickered in his eyes. "Your loyalties change quickly, Mara Elwood." "Not my loyalty," she replied. "My understanding." He nodded once and raised his arm. The camp moved as one, a quiet departure from the valley that had sheltered them. Mara fell in beside Esha as the medicine wagon rumbled behind. Tarek rode at the head, dropping back at times to confer with scouts or check their pace. The day unfolded to the steady rhythm of hooves on snow. They crossed pine forests and open meadows, alert, watchful. By midday the snowfall eased, weak winter sun glinting across the white expanse. Mara studied the people around her with new eyes, the dignity with which they endured displacement, the care shown to elders and children, the absence of complaint despite hardship. These were not the monsters of dime novels or newspaper lies. They were a people struggling simply to endure. As dusk crept down from the peaks, Tarek called a halt in a narrow ravine sheltered from the wind. The camp came together with practiced speed. Temporary shelters raised, fires coaxed to life, food prepared without wasted motion. Mara Elwood helped wherever she was needed, quietly relieved when her efforts were accepted without suspicion. After checking on Jonah Kincaid and Bram Keller, whose fever had eased during the day's march, she drifted toward the edge of camp. There, Tarek stood alone, facing west, watching the sun sink behind the broken ridges. "Your people move with remarkable skill," she said, stepping beside him. "We have had much reason to learn," he replied. A bitterness edged his voice. "Each season, the land we are allowed to exist upon grows smaller. Each year, more of my people die, or are forced onto reservations." "Are the reservations truly so terrible?" Mara asked. Tarek turned to her. The red and black war paint still cut sharply across his face in the fading light. "Have you ever seen a wild eagle locked in a cage?" he said. "How it slams its wings until they bleed, how its eyes lose their fire." He looked away. "That is what a reservation does to a people born free." Mara felt her chest tighten. "I think I'm beginning to understand." "Are you?" He faced her fully. "Then understand this. I will die before I allow my people to be caged. I will fight your soldiers, even your fiancé, if it comes to that." The mention of Vance Calder struck her, not with loyalty, but with a sharp, hollow disillusionment. "After what I've learned," she said quietly, "I no longer believe he is my fiancé." Tarek studied her face, searching. "Words are easily given. Then I will answer with action." Mara held his gaze. "I will not return to Fort Whipple. Not to a man who orders the deaths of innocent women and children." For a long moment, Tarek said nothing. The dusk swallowed his expression. When he finally spoke, his voice had softened. "You are not like other women, Mara Elwood." "So I've been told," she answered faintly. "Usually without praise?" A trace of warmth touched his mouth. "Rest now. Tomorrow will test us harder." The second day proved him right. The land grew harsh and unforgiving, forcing them to dismount and lead the horses through tight stone corridors and steep passes. By midday, heavy clouds bruised the horizon, promising fresh snow. Tarek ordered a brief halt in a small clearing. Mara sat on a fallen log, rubbing her aching legs, when raised voices echoed from the scouts ahead. Tarek spoke with them in low, urgent tones, his expression darkening. He returned to the group. "Frontier Lancers," he announced. "A patrol following our trail. 8 men, rifles." A ripple of tension swept through the Ash Hollow riders. One of the Ash Hollow women pulled her child close, fear flashing across her face. "How far?" a warrior asked. "Less than an hour behind us." Tarek's gaze moved across the people, measuring, weighing. "We cannot outrun them. Not with the wagon, not with the children." Silence fell, then his voice hardened. "So we stand." Another warrior moved to draw his weapon. "No." Tarek's voice cut clean through the tension. "They do not yet know our strength." He pointed to a cluster of riders. "You 5 take the Ash Hollow women, the Ash Hollow young, and the elders. Move toward the canyon lands. Do not stop." Then he turned to the rest. "The others stay with me. We lay a trail east." "A diversion," Mara Elwood said quietly. "Yes." Tarek met her eyes. "They will chase what looks like the larger force. Our people will reach safety." "It's dangerous," Mara said, worry breaking through. "War always is." He motioned to Esha. "You will go with them. Take Jonah Kincaid and Bram Keller as well." Mara shook her head. "I'm staying." Surprise flickered across Tarek's face. Why? Because if the soldiers catch you, I might help. She straightened. Vance Calder was my fiancé. They recognized me. I might buy you time. The Ash Hollow riders exchanged uneasy looks. Tarek studied her, his gaze steady and searching. You would risk yourself for Apache lives? I would risk myself for what's right. After a long moment, he nodded once. Very well, but you will do exactly as I tell you. Without question. The camp split swiftly. The main group moved northwest into the trees while Tarek, Mara, and 7 riders turned east to lay the false trail. Before leaving, Esha embraced Mara. You carry a warrior's heart, she whispered. May it lead you safely back to us. Mara watched the others vanish into the forest, then turned to Tarek. He had wiped away his war paint and changed into plain clothing, stripping himself of anything that marked him as a leader. We ride east, he said. We leave signs a child could follow. When night falls, we circle back. For hours they traveled deliberately, snapped branches, churned snow, scraps of food left behind. As dusk settled, they stopped in an open clearing and built a fire larger than needed. Now we wait, Tarek said. They'll see the flames. And then? They'll attack in the dark, or wait for dawn. His voice remained calm. Either way, when they charge, they'll find nothing. A faint smile touched his lips. An old trick? Still works? Night closed in, the mountains wrapped in deep shadow. Guards rotated while the others rested. Mara could not sleep, her thoughts tangled, of Vance Calder, of betrayal, of the man sitting beside her now. Tarek, whose presence pulled at her like a tide. You should rest, he said softly, noticing her wakefulness. I can't, Mara replied. Too much has changed. Tarek studied her across the firelight, his expression unreadable as the flames danced between them. You're thinking of your soldier, Tarek said quietly. I'm thinking of many things. Mara Elwood drew the fur cloak tighter around her shoulders. How quickly a life can turn. A week ago, I was riding to marry a man I believed I knew. And now, Tarek said, you sit beside the man he would call his enemy, helping him slip through the mountains. There was no accusation in his voice, only a steady, unsettling understanding. Mara lifted her eyes to him. Am I your enemy, Tarek? The question lingered between them, heavy with meanings neither was ready to name. Before he could answer, one of the Ash Hollow riders appeared from the darkness, speaking in a low rush of words. Tarek's body tightened at once. Frontier Lancers, he said to Mara, moving through the trees to the south. Careful. He issued quick, silent commands. The fire was damped down, leaving just enough glow to sell the lie of an occupied camp. Tarek caught Mara's arm and guided her toward the edge of the clearing, where the horses waited, already saddled. When I give the signal, he whispered, stay close. Do not make a sound. She nodded, her pulse pounding. Through the trees, she caught the faint shimmer of lantern light, men advancing slowly, weapons ready. Tarek positioned himself beside her, one hand resting on his knife, the other closing around her wrist. The pressure of his grip steadied her. Voices drifted closer. Orders murmured. Then one voice cut through the night, sharp and unmistakable. Vance Calder. I want the Apache leader alive if possible, he said. The rest are expendable, and watch for a white woman, blonde, blue eyes. She may be a hostage. Mara's breath hitched. Beside her, Tarek's grip tightened for a heartbeat, then loosened. On my mark, he breathed, so softly she barely caught it. 3, 2. A sudden shout shattered the stillness. Camp ahead, prepare to fire. Now, Tarek said. He pulled her towards the horses as chaos exploded behind them. Rifles cracked, muzzle flashes strobing through the dark. The Ash Hollow riders vanished into the forest like smoke, while the soldiers charged an empty camp. Mara vaulted into the saddle, fear sharpening her movements. Tarek mounted in one smooth motion and whistled, a low, precise signal. They rode hard into the night as shouts of confusion rose behind them, the patrol realizing too late they'd been fooled. For nearly an hour, they rode without speaking. Only the rasp of breathing horses and the crunch of snow beneath hooves broke the silence. Tarek led them through narrow cuts of stone and tangled timber no outsider could track. At last, he called a halt in a shallow hollow protected by rock and trees. The riders dismounted, tending the horses and catching their breath. "They won't find our trail before dawn," Tarek said, helping Mara down. "By then, the snow will bury it." Her legs shook from the ride. When she stumbled, he caught her arm, steady and sure. In the pale moonlight filtering through the branches, his face seemed carved of shadow and silver, hard lines, hidden depths. "I heard Vance," Mara said softly. "He called me a hostage." Tarek released her arm slowly. It is easier for him to believe that than to accept you chose a different road. She searched his face. "Do you believe it?" A pause. Then, quietly, "Perhaps it is even true." His eyes held hers. "Perhaps you are my hostage, Mara Elwood." The words hung between them, dangerous, unfinished, and charged with everything yet to come. There was something in his voice, a question hidden beneath the words. Mara Elwood felt herself drawn closer, as if unseen threads were tightening between them. "Is that what I am to you?" she asked softly. "A hostage?" Tarek's gaze dipped briefly to her lips, then returned to her eyes. "You know it is not." The quiet admission shifted something fundamental between them. A barrier gave way, leaving only the unguarded truth that had been forming since the first night in the snow. When Tarek lifted his hand and touched her cheek, Mara did not pull back. His fingers were warm, steady, gentle despite their strength. "From the moment I saw you standing in the storm," he said, voice low, charged, "defying me with fire in your eyes, you were never just a captive." "Then what am I?" Mara whispered, scarcely breathing. "A question I cannot answer," he replied. "A path I never intended to walk." His thumb traced the line of her jaw. "A woman who makes me forget the hatred I have carried." The Ash Hollow riders had quietly withdrawn, leaving them a fragile pocket of privacy. In the stillness of the winter night, with danger lingering just beyond the trees, Mara made a choice that would alter everything that followed. She rose onto her toes and kissed him. For a heartbeat, Tarek remained still, as if stunned by her daring. Then his arms came around her, pulling her close as he answered her kiss with a fierce, breath-stealing intensity. His mouth was unexpectedly soft, his hold both protective and commanding, a contradiction that mirrored the man himself. When they finally parted, Mara's heart thundered, not with fear but with a fierce, unfamiliar exhilaration. Tarek rested his forehead against hers, his breath uneven. "This changes everything," he murmured. Mara nodded, unable to find words. It did change everything. Her future, her sense of self, the borders between worlds she had once believed unbreakable. A low whistle from one of the scouts cut through the moment. Tarek straightened at once, the warrior returning to his eyes. "We must move," he said. "There is a place ahead where we can wait safely until dawn." They rode through the remainder of the night, neither speaking of what had passed between them, yet everything reshaped by it. By the time the eastern sky paled with the first hint of morning, they reached a hidden canyon where the rest of the people waited. Esha hurried forward as they arrived, pulling Mara into a brief, unexpected embrace. "You returned," she said. "When the scouts heard gunfire, we feared the worst." "The soldiers found only shadows," Tarek replied as he dismounted. His eyes flicked to Mara's for a fleeting second, silent understanding passing between them. The day was spent in guarded rest, scouts posted and senses sharp. Mara checked on Jonah Kincaid and Bram Keller, relieved to find both improving despite the ordeal. Bram, especially, seemed changed. "They saved my life," he told her as she replaced his bandage. "After Frontier Lancers shot me and left me to die, a man starts questioning what he's been taught." By evening, the scouts returned with word that the soldiers had lost the trail entirely and were turning back toward Fort Whipple. Relief moved through the camp, though Tarek kept guards posted as the light faded. As twilight settled over the canyon, stars pricking through the deepening blue, Mara found herself drawn to a small rise where Tarek stood alone, watching the night take hold. "The plan worked," Mara Elwood said as she joined him. "This time." Tarek's reply carried a fatigue she had not heard before. "Yes, but they will return, again and again, not until we are driven from these mountains." Mara reached out, resting her hand lightly on his arm. "What will you do?" He covered her hand with his own. "We move north, deeper into the high country. There are places the Frontier Lancers seldom reach, places where we might live in peace, at least for a while." Then he turned fully toward her, his expression open in a way she had never seen. "And after that," he paused. "That depends, in part, on you." Her breath caught. "On me?" "Last night," Tarek said carefully, when we... He drew a slow breath. "There are paths that, once chosen, change everything that follows." "I don't regret it," Mara said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "What I regret is how long it took me to see the truth. About Vance Calder, about your people, about you." Tarek took her hands in his. "And what truth do you see in me, Mara Elwood?" She stepped closer. "A man caught between worlds. A man fighting to protect what he loves. A man of honor in a time when such men are rare." Her voice softened. "A man I could love, if given the chance." The vulnerability that crossed his face stripped years from him, easing the weight he carried. His grip tightened slightly. "That road would not be simple," he warned. "You would walk between worlds, fully belonging to neither." "I already do," Mara replied with a faint smile. "Perhaps that's why I understand you." Tarek answered not with words, but by pulling her into his arms. His embrace was firm, certain, a promise stronger than any vow. Beneath a sky scattered with stars and framed by dark mountain walls, they stood together. Two lives joined across a divide shaped by blood and history. Later, as they sat near the central fire, Esha watched them with knowing eyes. "The spirits move in ways we do not always understand," she murmured to Mara. "What seems like misfortune is sometimes the first step onto a new road." Mara looked across the flames to where Tarek spoke with the Ash Hollow riders, his face alive in the firelight. "Do you believe peace is possible between our peoples?" she asked. Esha considered this carefully. "Not soon, perhaps not within our lifetimes." She glanced back at Mara. "But every journey begins with one step. Perhaps you and Tarek are that step." Morning came clear and bright, and with it, decisions. The Apache would continue north to their winter grounds, a hidden valley known only to them. Jonah Kincaid declared he would travel on to California once his strength returned. Bram Keller, unexpectedly, chose to remain with the Apache until spring. "I don't have anywhere urgent to be," he told Mara, and I owe them my life. Might as well make myself useful." As preparations were made, Tarek found Mara near the edge of camp. "We leave within the hour," he said. "I need to know your choice." She looked south, toward Fort Whipple beyond the distant ridges. The life she had planned waited there. Order, society, comfort. A life she now understood was built upon the suffering of others. Then she turned back to him, to the proud people who had shown her mercy instead of hatred, to a world harsher yet truer than the one she had left behind. "My choice is made," Mara said, meeting Tarek's eyes without hesitation. "I stay with you." The joy that broke across Tarek's face was like sunrise spilling over the mountains, sudden, fierce, impossible to hide. He took Mara Elwood's hands and pressed them against his chest, as if grounding the moment in his own heartbeat. "There will be trials," he said, even as warmth deepened his voice. "Your world will not release you easily." "My world is where I choose to stand," Mara replied. She stepped closer, her voice steady. "And I choose to be here, with you." When the Ash Hollow riders broke camp and continued north, Mara rode beside Tarek, no longer a captive, no longer an outsider. She moved forward as a woman who had found her path in the one place she never expected. Behind them, the mountains kept their silence. Ahead waited an uncertain future. Yet between them grew something stronger than fear or old hatred, something shaped by truth, hardened by loss, and sustained by the courage to defy everything they had been taught. In that bond lived a fragile beginning, a first tentative bridge between two worlds. Spring arrived in the northern Arizona mountains in a rush of color and light. Wildflowers spread across the valley, and melting snow fed streams that cut silver paths through new grass. The hidden land that had sheltered the Apache through winter now breathed again. Mara stood at the entrance of the wickiup she now shared with Tarek, watching Ash Hollow young chase one another through fields of blue lupine and orange paintbrush. 3 months had changed her more deeply than she could have imagined when she first crossed into Apache land. Her skin had darkened under the sun, her hands bore the marks of daily work, and her heart, once tethered to another life, had settled where it truly belonged. "You smile more now," Esha observed as she joined her. During the long winter, the two women had grown close. Esha had taught Mara the Apache tongue, their customs, the rhythms of survival. In return, Mara had taught reading and writing, not only to Esha, but to several of the children as well. "I have reasons to," Mara said, her gaze drifting to where Tarek worked with the other men, preparing for the spring hunt. His tall frame stood out easily, his movements calm and assured. "The council meets tonight," Esha said quietly. "They will decide whether the camp moves." A ripple of unease stirred in Mara's chest. The question had lingered for weeks: remain and risk discovery, or press farther north, away from soldiers and settlers. Tarek had wrestled with it in silence, torn between safety and the pull of ancestral ground. "Has he told you how he will stand?" Esha asked. "No," Mara answered softly. "He carries it alone, even when I try to share the weight." Isha rested a hand on her arm. "He protects you. Leadership is a heavy burden, especially when the lives of a people depend on it." As dusk settled into the valley, the council fire was lit at the camp's center. Women did not traditionally attend such gatherings, but Tarek had insisted Mara be present, not to speak, but to witness. She sat slightly apart from the circle, Isha beside her, as elders and warriors gathered. At the center stood Omak, the oldest among them, his wisdom honored across the bands. "We face a choice with no easy answer," Omak said, his voice steady despite his years. Each season the frontier lancers draw nearer. The game grows scarce. The land itself warns us. The fire cracked softly as the future of the Ash Hollow people hung in the balance. Our ancestral lands shrink like water beneath a summer sun. Voices rose around the council fire as the Ash Hollow riders spoke in turn. Some argued fiercely for moving north to regions where other Apache bands had found brief peace beyond the soldiers' reach. Others insisted that abandoning their traditional ground meant surrendering their spirit, and that the land must be defended no matter the cost. Tarek was the last to rise. Silence settled over the circle as he stood. His gaze moved slowly from face to face before resting, just for a breath, on Mara Elwood. "I have walked in both worlds," he said evenly. "I have learned the strength of the white man, and his weakness. I have felt his hatred, and only rarely his mercy." He paused, the firelight carving hard lines across his features. They will not stop coming. Their hunger for land, for gold, for all that we hold sacred has no end. Low murmurs of agreement rippled through the gathering. "But I have also seen this," Tarek continued. "They are not all the same." His eyes returned to Mara. "Among them are those who recognize injustice, those who would stand with us if given the chance, those who would choose our way over theirs." The meaning was unmistakable. Mara felt the weight of many eyes turned toward her, some curious, some still guarded despite the months she had lived among them. "I do not call for surrender," Tarek said firmly, "nor do I call for a war we cannot win." He drew a breath. "I propose a third path, one that demands a different kind of courage." He laid out his plan: to send emissaries directly to Governor Horace Belmont, bypassing the Army command at Fort Whipple, to appeal for formal recognition of their right to remain on part of their ancestral land, to use growing newspaper interest in Indian affairs to tell their story through sympathetic journalists rather than soldiers' reports. "It is a risk," he admitted, "but one worth taking before we abandon the mountains that have sheltered our people since before memory." The debate stretched deep into the night. Mara watched Tarek answer questions and challenges with calm resolve, neither yielding nor hardening. This was the leader she had only glimpsed before, the man who looked beyond survival towards the future of his people. Near midnight, the council finally broke. Tarek's proposal was accepted, though not by all. They would remain through the summer, prepare to move if necessary, and send representatives to begin negotiations. Mara waited outside their dwelling, pride and worry twisting together inside her chest. When Tarek approached, exhaustion etched his face, but his eyes softened when he saw her. "You were remarkable," she said quietly as he took her hands. "I was afraid," he admitted, a rare honesty slipping through. "So many lives rest on what comes next." She lifted a hand to his cheek. "You gave them hope, a way forward without losing dignity or safety." Tarek drew her into his arms, holding her as though she steadied him against uncertain ground. "There is something I must ask you," he said against her hair, "something I have considered for many days." She leaned back to meet his eyes. "What is it?" "The emissaries to the governor," he said slowly. "They will need someone who understands the white man's world, someone who can speak with authority there while standing for us." His gaze searched hers. "I would ask you to go with them." The request caught Mara off guard. Since winter, she had embraced life among the Apache, rarely thinking of the world she had left behind. The thought of returning, even briefly, stirred emotions she hadn't expected. "You want me to leave?" she asked softly. "I want you to help," Tarek corrected, his hand steady on her shoulders. "There is no one else who stands between our worlds as you do." No one else the governor might heed when Apache concerns were spoken aloud. And if she crossed paths with Vance Calder, the question could no longer be avoided. Captain Calder had never been a man to relinquish control easily. All through the winter, word had reached them of frontier lancers combing the mountains. None had pushed as far north as the Hidden Valley, but the threat lingered like a distant storm. "That is part of the danger," Tarek admitted, his jaw setting hard. "But you would not travel alone." He explained that 2 warriors would ride with her, Kiro and Zan, both fluent enough in English to manage dealings with white officials. Mara weighed the request in silence. The thought of leaving Tarek, even for a short time, tightened her chest. Yet she understood what this journey meant. Not just for him, but for his people. "When would we leave?" she asked. "In 2 weeks," he said, his thumbs tracing slow circles over her shoulders. "When the lower passes are finally clear. I would not ask this of you if there were another path." She nodded. "I know. And I will go." Her fingers lifted to the silver medallion resting against his chest, the one he had worn since the day they met. "But first," she said softly, "I need something from you." "Anything," he answered without hesitation. She touched the medallion. "Tell me about this. You never remove it." Something in Tarek's expression eased. Taking her hand, he led her inside their dwelling, where the last embers of the fire still glowed. He lifted the leather cord over his head and placed the medallion in her palm. The silver was worn smooth with age. It bore the image of a woman with flowing hair, ringed by rays of light. "It was my mother's," he said quietly. "The only thing I have of her. The Iron Cross brothers allowed me to keep it. They thought it resembled one of their saints. But it came from my father's people, far to the south." "She died when you were taken," Mara said gently. Tarek nodded and sat beside her on the furs. "Raiders attacked our camp. My father was killed defending us. My mother hid me in a cleft among the rocks." His voice remained even, but the pain behind his eyes was unmistakable. "She tried to draw them away. The missionaries found me 2 days later, still where she had placed me." Mara closed her fingers around the medallion, feeling its weight. "And you've carried her with you all this time." "It reminds me who I am," Tarek said simply. "When the missionaries tried to erase my past, when the army called me savage, when my own people doubted my loyalty after I returned, it reminds me that I am my mother's son, no matter how the world judges me." The trust in that confession struck Mara deeply. She opened her hand to return the medallion. "Thank you for telling me." Tarek didn't take it. Instead, he folded her fingers back around it. "Keep it," he said. "Carry it with you to the governor's city. Let it remind you who you are now, no matter how they choose to see you." "Tarek, I can't take this from you." "You are not taking," he said gently. "I am giving." He hesitated, then spoke with quiet certainty. "It is our way, when a man asks a woman to be his wife." Mara's breath caught. Though they had shared winter, labor, danger, and love, though their bond was already known among the Ash Hollow riders, they had never spoken the word aloud. Tarek knew what marriage meant in her former world, and now, without ceremony or spectacle, he offered it to her in the only way that mattered, by trust. "Are you asking me to marry you?" Mara whispered, scarcely trusting her own breath. Tarek cupped her face in both hands, his thumbs warm against her cheeks. "I am asking you to be my wife in every way," he said steadily, "before your world and mine, to build a life that stands between them, no matter how hard that road may be." Joy surged through Mara like a river breaking its banks. "Yes," she answered, the word fierce and unrestrained. "Yes, I will be your wife." Their kiss sealed the promise. Soft at first, then deepening with the strength of everything they had survived together. When they finally parted, Tarek rested his forehead against hers, the quiet gesture that had become their unspoken language. "When you return," he murmured, "we will have the ceremony. Apache and white. Both. If that is what you want." Mara smiled, her happiness bright enough to soften the fear she felt about leaving. "I want only to be yours," she said, "in whatever way makes that truth unbreakable." Dawn arrived clear and cool on the morning of departure. Mara wore a dress sewn by Isha, a careful blend of Apache design and white tailoring, something that allowed her to move between worlds without abandoning either. Kiro and Zan, the two warriors riding with her, had altered their appearance as well, though they still carried traditional weapons alongside the rifles gained through trade. The camp gathered to see them off, offering small gifts and quiet blessings for safe passage. Jonah Kincaid, who had remained through the winter because of his age and the brutal travel conditions, chose to ride with Mara's party as far as the territorial capital before continuing on to California. "You've changed how I see the world," he told her as they prepared to leave. "Ms. Elwood, or should I say Mrs. Tarek?" Mara smiled, amused by a title that fit neither world perfectly. "Just Mara," she said gently. "And you've changed too," she added. The old man nodded, glancing toward Bram Keller, who stood nearby with several Apache men. True to his word, Bram had made himself useful through the winter, teaching carpentry, learning to hunt, and finding a peace among the Ash Hollow riders that white society had never given him. "Funny thing, life," Jonah said quietly. "A stagecoach wreck that should have killed us instead gave us new beginnings." When the moment came to say goodbye, Tarek walked with Mara to the edge of camp where the horses waited. Though many watched, their farewell felt private, held within the small space between them. 3 weeks, Mara said, touching the silver medallion now resting against her chest. "I'll be back before the summer solstice." Tarek nodded, his hands steady at her waist. "Be careful in the white man's city. There are those who will not understand your choice." "Ogham, I will be careful," she promised. She kissed him once more, committing the feel of him to memory. "And I will succeed. I'll help them see that peace is possible." "If anyone can bridge these worlds," Tarek said softly, lifting her into the saddle, "it is you, my heart." "Return to me," he added. "Always," Mara replied. The small party rode out of the valley as the sun crested the eastern mountains, leaving behind a home and riding toward a future neither world had ever imagined. Mara did not look back until they reached the ridgeline where the valley finally vanished from view. When she turned, Tarek still stood where she had left him, a lone figure against the rising light, watching her go. She lifted her hand in farewell. The silver medallion glinted against her chest, catching the morning sun before she urged her horse forward onto the uncertain road ahead. The territorial capital overwhelmed her senses. After months in the wilderness, the noise, crowds, and stiff formality of dress and manners felt strangely hollow, almost theatrical. Mara moved through the streets with careful distance, aware that she no longer fully belonged to the society she once accepted without question. Kiro and Zan made camp beyond the town limits, unwilling to subject themselves to stares, or worse, from the townspeople. Mara, presenting herself as the widow of a miner, secured a room in a modest boarding house. Her fair complexion and polished speech allowed her to pass easily among white society, yet she felt increasingly like an imposter among her own people. Gaining an audience with Governor Horace Belmont proved harder than she had expected. For days, she was turned away by officials from the High Mesa office, dismissed by clerks and secretaries who treated her politely but firmly. It was only after a chance meeting with the governor's wife at a charity gathering, where Mara's familiarity with Eastern customs made a favorable impression, that the doors finally opened. "Mrs. Elwood," Governor Belmont said with courteous detachment when she was ushered into his office. "My wife speaks well of you. How may I assist?" Mara had rehearsed this moment countless times, both with Tarek and alone. She chose her words with care. "Thank you for seeing me, Governor. I've come regarding a matter of some delicacy, the Apache situation in the Northern Territories." Belmont's expression hardened at once. "The Apache matter is a military concern, madam. Any grievances should be directed to Fort Whipple." "That would be difficult," Mara replied evenly, leaning forward just enough to signal resolve. "I bring a proposal directly from Tarek, leader of the Ash Hollow Riders, a proposal for peace negotiations that would bypass military command." The governor's brows rose. "You claim to have dealings with the Apache chief who has evaded our patrols for nearly a year?" "I've done more than deal with him," Mara said steadily. "I lived among his people through the winter. I come as their emissary, authorized to begin preliminary talks." Suspicion replaced surprise. "Why would an Apache leader send a white woman to speak for him?" "Because I understand both worlds," Mara answered without wavering. "Last winter I was traveling to Fort Whipple to marry Captain Vance Calder when my stagecoach wrecked in Apache territory. Tarek's people saved my life. Living among them showed me how deeply wrong many of our beliefs are." She laid out Tarek's proposal in full. Recognition of defined Apache lands in exchange for peace, regulated trade posts to benefit both communities, and an end to indiscriminate military pursuit. As she spoke, Belmont's dismissive posture softened into reluctant interest. "This is highly irregular," he said when she finished. "The Army would object strongly to being excluded." "The Army has failed to resolve the conflict through force," Mara countered. "Captain Calder's policy of pursuing Apache bands regardless of guilt has only intensified bloodshed and resentment." Silence settled between them. Heavy, uncertain, but no longer dismissive. "Tarek offers an alternative that could spare lives on both sides." "Boy." Governor Horace Belmont studied Mara Elwood with renewed intensity. "You speak with uncommon conviction for a woman who was meant to marry an Army officer," he said. "Does Captain Vance Calder know of this change in your circumstances?" "No," Mara answered honestly, "though I imagine my absence has led him to his own conclusions." The governor rose and crossed to the window overlooking the busy square below. "What you ask of me requires political courage," he said without turning. "Settlers demand protection. The Army demands freedom to act. And you ask me to negotiate directly with a people many still call savages." "I ask you to recognize their humanity," Mara replied quietly. "To acknowledge their right to land they have lived on for generations. To seek peace through understanding, not domination." Belmont turned back to her, his expression measured. "Return tomorrow with your Apache companions. I will hear them speak before I decide." It was more than Mara had dared hope for. She left his office with cautious optimism lifting her steps. Perhaps real change was possible after all. That hope shattered moments later. As she turned the corner toward her boarding house, a familiar figure stepped into her path, blocking the street as surely as a drawn blade. Captain Vance Calder. He looked older than she remembered. Harder. The months had etched deep lines around his eyes and mouth. His uniform was immaculate, worn with rigid precision, as if discipline alone kept him intact. "Mara," he said, her name sharp on his tongue. "So it's true. You're alive?" She steadied herself. "Hello, Vance." "6 months," he said tightly. 6 months of searching, of wondering if you were dead, or worse, and now I find you walking freely through the territorial capital, healthy as ever." "I am well," Mara replied, painfully aware of the silver medallion hidden beneath her collar, Tarek's pledge resting against her heart. "Where have you been?" he demanded, stepping closer. "The patrols found the wreckage, the dead. Bram Keller vanished, Jonah Kincaid vanished, and you disappeared." "I was rescued," Mara said carefully, "by people who showed me kindness when I had nothing." Understanding flickered in his eyes, then curdled into disgust. The Apache. His gaze swept over her, searching for signs of coercion. "Were you a prisoner? Did they force you?" "No, Vance." Her voice was steady. "I chose to stay." His face twisted in disbelief. "Chose? To live among savages who raid settlements and murder soldiers?" "I chose to live among people driven from their land," Mara replied, strength rising in her voice. "Among families whose children are killed, whose lives are being erased piece by piece. I've seen both sides now." She met his stare without flinching. "They are not the monsters you believe them to be." He looked at her as though she were a stranger. "Who are you?" he asked. "The woman I knew would never defend hostiles against her own kind." Mara felt the truth settle like iron in her chest. "Then perhaps," she said quietly, "the woman you knew never truly understood the world she lived in. The woman you knew never saw the truth." Mara drew in a steadying breath. "I'm sorry for the pain my disappearance caused you, Vance, truly, but I can't return to the life we planned." "Because of them?" His voice lifted, sharp enough to turn a few heads on the street. "Or because of him? The scouts say you're with their leader now, that you've become his." He broke off, anger and humiliation coloring his face. Mara's hand went, without thought, to the medallion beneath her dress. "His wife," she said quietly. "I am to be Tarek's wife." Vance flinched as if struck. For an instant, she feared he might raise his hand. The fury in his eyes burned hot and unchecked. Then he drew himself upright, spine rigid with military control. "You've made your choice," he said, his voice suddenly cold. "Know this. The territory isn't large enough for both your Apache lover and me. One of us won't see the year's end." The threat slid through her like ice. "Vance, please. There's still a chance for peace. I've spoken with the governor." "Peace?" He laughed, bitter and hollow. "There will be no peace while a single Apache draws breath in these mountains. I'll see to that myself." He stepped aside with a mock courtesy. "Good day, Miss Elwood. Our engagement is, of course, ended." Mara watched him walk away, back ramrod straight, fists clenched at his sides. The encounter left her shaken, but resolute. She knew him too well to doubt the hatred driving him now. She had to warn Tarek. The meeting with Governor Horace Belmont the following day went better than she dared hope. Cairo and Zan, dignified in their careful blend of traditional dress and white tailoring, spoke with calm authority. They described their people's desire for peace, their willingness to accept limited settlement in exchange for protected hunting grounds, their hope that Ash Hollow young might grow without fear. Belmont listened closely, asking pointed questions that revealed a deeper grasp of the conflict than Mara had expected. By the end, he agreed to draft a preliminary framework for negotiations, one that would bring Tarek and other Apache leaders to a formal peace council within 2 months. It was a fragile victory, but a victory nonetheless. As they left the governor's residence, hope surged, shadowed by dread. "We must return to camp at once," Mara told Cairo and Zan as they collected their horses. "Captain Calder knows about me. He may already be planning an attack." They rode hard for 3 days, pushing horses and bodies to the brink. With every mile, Mara's worry grew. She had sent word to Tarek through a trusted trader, but there was no way to know if it had reached him. On the 4th day, as they neared the hidden valley, her fear became reality. Smoke rose above the tree line. Not the thin threads of cooking fires, but thick, black columns of ruin. "No!" The cry tore from her as they spurred forward. Kiro and Zan closed in beside her, arrows drawn and ready, as they crested the final ridge. The sight below wrenched Mara's breath from her chest. Nearly half the camp lay destroyed. Wickiups and wooden shelters reduced to smoking rubble. Ash drifted through the air like black snow. Ash Hollow riders moved silently among the ruins, binding wounds, lifting debris, salvaging what little could be saved. There were no soldiers in sight. The attack was over. They drove their horses down the slope at a reckless pace. As they reached the camp's edge, Esha ran toward them, her face smeared with soot but her body unbroken. "You came back," she cried, seizing Mara's hands as she dismounted. "When the bluecoats came, we feared you were lost." "Tarek?" Mara gasped, dread tightening her throat. "Where is Tarek?" Esha's expression was grave, but not hopeless. "The healing lodge. He lives, but—" Mara didn't wait to hear the rest. She ran, barely seeing the devastation around her, every step driven by a single burning need. The large structure at the heart of the camp loomed ahead. Inside, the air was thick with crushed herbs and the sharp metallic smell of blood. Tarek lay on a pallet near the fire. Bandages soaked dark red wrapped his chest. His skin, usually bronze and alive with strength, was pale. His breathing came shallow and uneven. When Mara dropped to her knees beside him, his eyes fluttered open. Recognition, then relief, filled his gaze. "You came back," he whispered, his voice torn raw. "Of course I came back," Mara said, clasping his hand with care. "What happened?" "Calder." Tarek breathed the name like a curse. "He came at dawn with 30 frontier lancers. Scouts warned us. Most of the women in Ash Hollow Young were moved to the high caves, but—" Pain cut him short. "Don't speak," Mara pleaded, tears blurring her sight. "Save your strength." His fingers tightened around hers. "Listen, this changes everything. The camp isn't safe now. They know where we are." The medicine woman stepped forward, gently inspecting the bandages. "The bullet passed through his shoulder," she told Mara. "Another grazed his side. He is strong. He will heal." Mara bowed her head in gratitude, then leaned close to Tarek. "I have news. Governor Horace Belmont agreed to negotiations, a formal peace council within 2 months. There is still hope." A shadow crossed Tarek's face. "Calder will never allow it. He will hunt us until one of us falls." "Then we make sure it isn't you," Mara said fiercely. She drew the silver medallion from beneath her dress and pressed it into his palm. "Your mother protected you once. Let her strength guard you again." Tarek's fingers closed around the disc. His eyes searched hers. "You still wish to be my wife, even now with everything burned?" "Now more than ever," Mara answered without hesitation. In the days that followed, the camp struggled back from the brink. 5 had been lost, 3 warriors, 1 elder, and 1 child caught in the chaos. They were mourned in a solemn ceremony beneath the open sky. Mara stood beside Tarek as his chosen wife, her spine straight despite the wary looks from some who believed her presence had drawn the soldiers to their home. Tarek healed faster than anyone expected, though new scars joined the old, marks of a battle far from finished. The council gathered once more, and this time there was no dissent. The decision was unanimous. They would move farther into the high country while keeping quiet contact with Governor Horace Belmont through trusted intermediaries. As preparations began, Bram Keller approached Mara Elwood one evening while she filled a bucket at the stream. "I'm leaving," he said without ceremony. Mara straightened, startled. "Leaving? Where are you going?" "Fort Whipple." At the alarm in her eyes, he lifted a hand. "Not to join them, to confront them." "What do you mean?" Bram's expression was set, resolute. "Vance Calder won't stop. You know that. Pride and jealousy have eaten him alive. But if I speak, if I testify to what I've seen, the Army's brutality and the Apache restraint, someone might listen." It's dangerous, Mara warned. He could arrest you as a traitor. Some risks are worth taking. Bram gave a faint, crooked smile. Before the crash, I was a smaller man. Selfish, blind. These people changed that. I owe them more than I can ever repay. This is the least I can do. 2 days later, Bram rode south with the council's blessing, and Tarek's reluctant respect. The Ash Hollow Riders began their migration soon after, a long, solemn procession of families and belongings winding deeper into the mountains. Tarek and Mara rode at the front. His arm remained bound in a sling, but his presence was as commanding as ever. "We received word from the capital," he told her as they guided their horses through a narrow pass. "Belmont is holding firm. He's insisting on observers to keep the talks honest." Hope stirred in Mara's chest. "Then there's still a chance." "A chance," Tarek agreed, cautious. "But Calder remains a danger. His patrol was seen to the east, moving parallel to us." "He won't stop," Mara said quietly. "Not until one of us is dead," Tarek finished. "I know." They made camp that night in a sheltered box canyon, guards posted high along the ridgelines. As darkness settled, Mara sat beside Tarek at their private fire, speaking softly about the marriage ceremony they refused to delay any longer. "We'll blend both traditions," Tarek said, tracing shapes in the dirt with a stick. "The Apache binding rite, and words from your faith." Mara leaned against his uninjured shoulder, calm despite the danger pressing in beyond the firelight. "All that matters is that we face what comes together." The peace shattered with a sudden commotion. Shouts rang out, followed by the thunder of hooves. Tarek was on his feet in an instant, knife in hand despite his wound. Mara rose beside him, fingers closing around the small pistol she had carried since the attack. A single rider burst into the circle of fires, his horse lathered and trembling. With a jolt of disbelief, Mara recognized Bram Keller, bloodied, torn, barely upright. "Calder," he gasped as warriors hauled him down. "Coming now, 30 men. They know where you are." Tarek barked orders, the camp snapping into motion for immediate evacuation. "How?" he demanded. "How did they find us?" "They tortured a traitor," Bram said hoarsely, accepting water from Esha. "A man who'd seen you moving north." The canyon echoed with urgency as the camp prepared to run once more, knowing this time there would be no outrunning what was coming. "I broke away to warn you," Bram Keller said, breath ragged. "They're less than an hour behind me." Mara met Tarek's eyes and saw her own resolve mirrored there. "We can't keep running," she said quietly. "Not forever." "No," he agreed, his voice hardening. "We can't." What followed was not the chaos of flight, but the clarity of decision. The Ash Hollow women, the Ash Hollow young, and the elders would continue north with most of the supplies. Tarek and his warriors would stay and face Vance Calder's patrol, on their own ground, by their own choosing. "I'm staying," Mara said when Tarek tried to send her with the others. "This isn't your fight," he argued, though pride flickered in his eyes. "It became my fight the moment I chose you," she answered, "and I may be the only one he'll listen to." Tarek searched her face, then nodded once. "Stay close to me. If it turns bad, you ride north and don't look back." "Nothing will turn bad," Mara said, steadier than she felt. "Not when we stand on the truth." They chose a narrow pass where steep rock walls funneled the trail. Not for ambush, this time, but for parley. Tarek would meet Calder face to face, the governor's sealed agreement in hand as proof of lawful intent. "He won't care about papers," Bram warned as they took position. "He's beyond reason where you're concerned." "Then I'll make him listen," Mara said, smoothing her dress, the same one she'd worn to meet Governor Horace Belmont. Her hair was simple, her bearing deliberate, a bridge between the worlds she now carried. Dawn came clear and cold. Scouts reported the patrol approaching fast, openly. No stealth. They knew they were expected. Tarek stepped to the center of the pass. Mara stood at his side. Behind them, half hidden among the rocks, 20 warriors waited with rifles and bows, enough to make violence costly, not enough to invite it. "Peace first," Tarek told them. "Blood only if there is no other road." The patrol appeared as the sun crested the ridge. Captain Vance Calder rode at the front, uniform pristine despite the trail. He raised a hand, halting his men when he saw the Apache waiting. For a long breath, no one moved. Tension drew tight as a bowstring. Then Calder rode forward alone and stopped 30 paces away. "So," he called into the still air, "the renegade and his white squaw." Mara felt Tarek tense and was grateful when he stayed silent as planned. She stepped forward. "Captain Calder," she said, formal and clear. "We meet under the authority of Governor Belmont, who has sanctioned peace negotiations between the territorial government and the Apache Nation." She lifted the document, the governor's seal catching the light. Calder's eyes narrowed. He didn't reach for it. "The governor oversteps," he replied coldly. "Military matters fall under Army command. These hostiles are wanted for attacks on settlements and patrols." "False charges," Tarek said at last, his voice calm and unwavering. "My people have not raided settlements." The pass held its breath, waiting to see which truth would prevail. "We defended ourselves against attacks your soldiers started," Tarek said, calm but unyielding. Vance Calder's eyes locked onto him, naked hatred burning there. "You took what belonged to me." "Mara Elwood makes her own choices," Tarek replied evenly, as she chose to seek peace between our peoples instead of more graves. Calder's jaw tightened. "There will be peace when your kind is either penned on a reservation or buried." Mara stepped forward, ignoring the quiet warning in Tarek's hand on her arm. "Vance," she said, using his given name on purpose. "I know who you were. You were once an honorable man." A flicker crossed his eyes, the ghost of someone she had loved, then vanished beneath wounded pride. "You chose him," he said flatly. "A savage over civilization, over your own kind." "I chose compassion over cruelty," Mara answered. "Understanding over hate. If that makes me a traitor in your eyes, so be it. But Governor Horace Belmont believes peace is possible. Will you defy him and your own humanity just to satisfy revenge?" Calder's hand slid to his holster and rested there. Behind him, the frontier lancers stiffened, rifles lifting. "One last chance," he said quietly. "Come back with me. Renounce this farce, and I'll let the Apache go north. Leave the territory and never return." Mara felt Tarek straighten beside her. "And if she refuses?" he asked, already knowing. Calder's smile was thin and merciless. "Then I finish what I started at your camp." Hoofbeats thundered from the southern mouth of the pass. A single rider approached fast, no blue coat, but the formal dress of the territorial government. The soldiers parted in confusion as he reined in beside Calder. "Captain Calder," the man announced loudly, "I bring orders from Governor Belmont. You are relieved of command, effective immediately, pending investigation into unauthorized action against peaceful Indians." Calder stared at him. "On whose authority?" "On the authority of the territorial government," the official replied, producing a sealed document. "With the full support of your commanding general, who was deeply concerned to learn of your personal vendetta. Your men will return to Fort Whipple at once. You will accompany me to the capital to answer formal charges." Silence gripped the pass. Calder's hand hovered near his weapon as shock gave way to rage, and then to a bitter resignation. "This isn't finished," he said to Mara, his voice low. "Not while I'm breathing." "It is finished, Captain," the official said sharply. unless you wish to add disobedience to your list of offenses. For a heartbeat, Mara thought Calder might draw anyway. Then years of drilled discipline won. He turned his horse sharply and barked at his men. "Back to the fort." As the patrol withdrew down the pass, the official approached Tarek and Mara. "Chief Tarek," he said with measured respect. "Miss Elwood, the governor sends his regards and confirms that the Peace Council will proceed as promised." The official's tone softened. What has happened here only deepened the governor's determination to see justice done. Mara was still reeling. "How did you know where to find us?" "Bram Keller," the man answered with a faint, knowing smile. "He reached Governor Horace Belmont before Captain Calder's allies could silence him. His testimony, combined with your groundwork, gave the governor the resolve to act without delay." Tarek stepped forward and extended his hand in the white man's manner. "Your timing saved lives. You have our thanks." "This road toward peace is only beginning," the official replied as he shook Tarek's hand. "Many will resist it, but today at least blood was spared." When he rode off to escort Calder's patrol back toward civilization, the Ash Hollow Riders emerged from their hidden positions. Relief moved through them like a held breath finally released. Tarek turned to Mara, wonder and guarded hope mingling in his eyes. "Perhaps there truly is a way between our worlds." "There always was," Mara said softly. "We only had to be brave enough to walk it." 3 weeks later, beneath a flawless summer sky, Mara, Elwood, and Tarek stood side by side on a high rise overlooking their new camp. Below them, Apache leaders and white officials mingled with cautious respect as the first day of the formal Peace Council unfolded, tentative, deliberate, but real. Governor Horace Belmont himself had traveled to the neutral ground, accompanied by representatives from Washington eager to settle the Apache conflict without further military disgrace. Tarek had gathered leaders from several bands, presenting a united voice that could no longer be ignored. But this morning was not about politics. They faced one another dressed in garments that honored both worlds. Mara in a white dress threaded with Apache beadwork, Tarek in ceremonial buckskins, a silver watch chain from the white world resting against his chest. The rising sun washed the mountains in gold. Esha stood nearby, holding the woven blanket that would bind them according to Apache custom. An elderly missionary, once part of Tarek's past, and summoned south at Mara's request, waited to speak the vows that would honor her upbringing. "Two worlds," Tarek murmured, closing his hands around hers. "One heart." The silver medallion, once his mother's, rested against Mara's breast, hanging from a beaded chain, catching the light like a living promise. Around them, people from both cultures gathered to witness what many once believed impossible. As the ceremony began, Mara looked into Tarek's eyes and saw a future reflected there. Not easy, perhaps, but filled with meaning and love. The path they had chosen would demand courage again and again. Peace would be fragile. Old hatred would not fade quickly. Yet standing there, with his hands steady around hers, Mara knew with absolute certainty that she had found her true home. Not in a place, but in the heart of the man who had claimed her with a single look across a frozen wilderness. "I'm yours," she vowed, her voice clear in the mountain air. "In this life, and whatever follows." "And I am yours," Tarek answered, the words both oath and blessing, "until the stars fall from the sky." Their kiss sealed the promise. The gathering erupted, Apache cries rising alongside white applause, discordant yet strangely harmonious, like the union they celebrated. The future remained uncertain. Peace talks would face trials. Somewhere, Vance Calder nursed his wounded pride and plotted his return. But those shadows belonged to tomorrow. Today belonged to a love that had crossed lines drawn by fear, tradition, and bloodshed. It belonged to two people who had looked beyond what they were taught to hate and found, in each other, the courage to imagine something better. Beneath the vast Arizona sky, Tarek drew Mara into his arms. The land around them, scarred by conflict, soaked in memory, felt suddenly lighter, as if it, too, were bearing witness to a fragile turning of the tide. Their love had not been born of ease or comfort, but forged in cold nights, hard choices, and moments when walking away would have been far simpler than standing firm. Around them stood two peoples who had taken their first uncertain steps toward understanding, not because the past had been erased, but because the future demanded bravery. Hope did not arrive as a grand promise. It lived quietly in joined hands, in shared vows, in the choice to stay when leaving would have been safer. And there, in the wilderness that had once tried to break them, love endured, unyielding, defiant, and alive. What began with a single look had grown into a bond strong enough to challenge old hatreds and imagine a different world. Not perfect, not without struggle, but real. And that, at last, was enough. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for listening and for allowing this story to speak to your heart. The Wild West still holds countless truths, some painful, some tender, all worth remembering. Stay with us, subscribe, comment, and invite others to discover these untamed stories, from our hearts to yours. Thank you for being part of this journey. Aviso legal barra disclaimer. Each story shared here is produced for storytelling enjoyment. Certain scenes may include fictional or dramatized elements inspired by historical circumstances. Although AI tools assist us in visuals, narration, and script development, the emotional tone, editing, and quality control are conducted by people to ensure meaningful experiences. We fully uphold YouTube's policies, using no deceptive recreations or impersonations of real individuals. All creative resources are properly licensed. Unauthorized copying, re-uploading, or remixing is not permitted. Thank you for supporting the effort behind every episode we create.